The great nuptial flight is over. For a brief, glorious afternoon, a young princess rode the high winds, mating with males in a massive synchronized aerial swarm. But as she tumbles back to Earth, her brief moment of absolute freedom evaporates instantly. She is now a mated queen, carrying a lifelong supply of genetic material, and the clock on her survival has officially begun. Her magnificent wings, once her ticket to the sky, are now a lethal liability. On the ground, they are bright targets for predators and physical obstacles to digging. Using her strong legs and sharp mandibles, she undergoes a brutal self-mutilation, scraping, chewing, and snapping off the wings until they flutter uselessly into the dirt. She is no longer a creature of the air. She is now built entirely for the subterranean depth. Unprotected and exposed on the surface, she is a high-protein prize for an army of predators. Spiders, beetles, and birds patrol the leaf litter. Every second she spends in the open brings her closer to death. She must find a suitable patch of earth to break ground before her scent trail alerts the hunters of the forest floor. Finding a patch of soft clay, she begins to dig with ferocious speed. Her mandibles tear into the earth, lifting loads of soil many times her own weight. This is the cold open of her subterranean empire, a desperate, exhausting excavation against time, carving out a sanctuary where she can lock herself away from the dangers of the upper world. At the bottom of her short shaft, she excavates a tiny, spherical room barely larger than her own body. This is her claustral chamber, a highly specialized survival cell designed to isolate her entirely from the outer ecosystem. There are no grand corridors or storage rooms here, just a tight, compact bunker engineered for maximum energy conservation. With the chamber complete, she executes her most extreme survival decision. She seals the entrance. Grabbing loose mud from the floor and walls, she packs the tunnel tight, sealing it from the inside out. By destroying the doorway, she guarantees that no predator can easily track her, but she also seals her own fate. There is no way back out. The door is closed, and the countdown begins. Now begins the absolute lockdown. From this moment on, there will be no foraging, no food, and no outside help. The queen must survive weeks, sometimes months, in total isolation. To pull off this impossible thermodynamic feat, she relies on a secret biological engine. Her massive, useless wing flight muscles will now be systematically digested and broken down internally to fuel her survival. This is the ultimate survival sprint. As the days bleed into weeks, the queen literally eats herself from the inside out. Her body systematically consumes its own fat reserves and breaks down the protein of her dissolved flight muscles. Many founding queens lose over half of their entire body mass during this phase, walking a razor-thin line between generating new life and total biological starvation. Despite her starving state, the queen's reproductive system springs into action. Within days of sealing her tomb, she lays her very first batch of eggs. They are microscopic, glowing white specks of pure potential, representing the entire genetic future of her species. She gathers them tenderly, nesting them in a neat pile against the damp earth. The sealed dampness of the underground cell is a breeding ground for deadly molds and fungal spores. Left alone, the eggs would rot within 48 hours. The queen becomes a meticulous full-time nurse. She constantly licks and cleans every single egg, coating them with a specialized antiseptic saliva that keeps them perfectly sterile and hydrated. Weeks pass, and the eggs begin to hatch. Out emerge tiny, soft-bodied, worm-like larvae. They have no legs, no eyes, and no way to feed themselves. They rely entirely on their mother, but with the chamber still completely sealed and no food in sight, the queen must make the ultimate metabolic sacrifice to keep them alive. To feed her hungry babies, the queen performs a chemical miracle. Her body processes the dissolved proteins from her broken down flight muscles into a rich, hypernutritional salivary fluid. She regurgitates this chemical cocktail directly into the mouths of her larvae. She is literally feeding her offspring with her own liquefied physical body. When her fluid reserves run dangerously low, the queen deploys another survival strategy: trophic eggs. These are specialized, non-viable eggs packed with pure yolk and protein, produced solely as baby food. She feeds these sterile eggs directly to her largest larvae, recycling her own internal energy to ensure that at least a few individuals reach maturity. Now comes the peak tension point. Weeks have turned into months. The queen is physically spent, her body tissue completely hollowed out by months of starvation and constant nursing. Her larvae have spun silk cocoons, entering the final pupal stage of development. It is a desperate, silent race against time. Will she starve to death before her first workers awaken to save her? Finally, the day of reckoning arrives. Inside one of the silk cocoons, a tiny leg moves. The queen carefully bites open the tough silk envelope, assisting her firstborn as it emerges into the dark chamber. This is her very first worker, a historical milestone that marks the beginning of a brand new superorganism. These first-generation workers are called nanitics because the starving queen could provide only the bare minimum of nutrition. These ants are significantly smaller, weaker, and have shorter lifespans than normal workers, but they are fully functional, highly motivated, and structurally complete, engineered purely to break the lockdown. Within hours of hatching, their instincts kick in. The nanitics ignore their own weakness and climb to the sealed entrance. Using their tiny jaws, they begin clawing through the hard, packed mud plug that has sealed the chamber for months. They carve a microscopic escape hatch, breaking out into the blinding open air of the yard. They return bearing gifts. The nanitics forage close to home, gathering sweet nectar drops and rich insect proteins from the surrounding grass. They navigate back down the tunnel and feed their starving mother, injecting her with the raw calories she needs to recover. The siege is broken. The queen will never have to starve, and she will never have to leave the dark again. With the first generation of workers taking over all maintenance, foraging, and defense, the queen's role undergoes a radical transformation. She is no longer a builder, a nurse, or a survivor. She retires into the deepest, safest vault of the growing supercity, transforming into a pure, automated, biological egg-laying engine. It is a life defined by a beautiful, brutal trade-off. She exchanged the warm sun, the cool wind, and the wide open sky of her single day of freedom for a lifetime sealed inside a pitch-black tomb. But in that dark, she has built an empire that can live for decades, a testament to the incredible, silent engineering of the solo queen who dug her own grave to build a kingdom. For months, this tiny underground chamber has been a sealed tomb, silent and completely cut off from the upper world. Inside, a founding queen has starved in total darkness, sacrificing her own body tissue to rear her first offspring. But today, the silence is broken. A sharp mandible punches through the hard-packed clay wall, reversing the lockdown and letting light flood the nest for the first time. The architect of this jailbreak is not the massive queen, but her very first daughter, working tirelessly from the inside. This newborn ant chips away at the heavy mud door, clearing a narrow escape hatch. This is the mirror image of the day the queen sealed herself in. a slow, deliberate reopening that signals the birth of a new colony. As the first workers emerge into the light, their physical limitations become immediately apparent. These are nanitics, the first-generation vanguard. Because their starving mother could only feed them on minimal metabolic secretions, they are severely undersized, slender, and fragile, looking like ghosts next to a mature worker from an established colony. Despite their physical weakness, these nanitics are born with an urgent, hyper-focused biological mandate. They must find food immediately, or their mother will die of exhaustion. Without a single day of prior experience, backup forces, or older scouts to guide them, a lone nanitic steps past the threshold and enters the wilderness. For a creature this small, the backyard lawn is a trackless, hostile desert. A single dried leaf is a mountain. A fallen pine needle is a fallen redwood. Navigating this terrain requires immense physical effort from a starving insect, and every step taken away from the entrance increases the risk of getting lost forever in the green maze. Danger looms in every shadow. Without soldiers to defend them or warning pheromones to alert them, these first foraging trips are pure survival horror. A hunting spider or a passing beetle is a colossal monster capable of obliterating the colony's entire labor force in a single strike. The nanitic must rely entirely on stealth to survive. The drive of hunger pushes the worker forward. Suddenly, its chemical receptors lock onto a target, a fallen fruit, split open and oozing rich, sugar-dense juices. This is the life-saving payload the colony needs. The nanitic moves in immediately, ready to harvest the caloric energy that will sustain her family. Ants possess a highly efficient internal transit mechanism known as the social stomach or crop. Instead of digesting the food immediately, the nanitic stores the liquid nectar in this specialized internal reservoir, acting as a living pipeline. Her abdomen stretches and tightens, carrying a heavy burden of survival back to the bunker. The return journey is a race against a ticking clock. Heavy with food and running out of physical energy, the nanitic retraces its invisible chemical path back through the grass jungle. Against all odds, it reaches the tiny opening and dives back into the safety of the earth, completing its very first successful mission. Deep in the chamber, the ultimate handoff occurs. The tiny worker approaches her massive skeletal mother and initiates trophallaxis, mouth-to-mouth liquid feeding. For the first time in her life, the queen does not have to expend her own energy. She is fed by the very life she created. The isolation of her founding phase is officially over. The success of this first meal ripples instantly through the nursery. The remaining nanitics distribute the harvested sugars and proteins to the younger larvae resting on the clay shelves. With fresh nutrition entering the ecosystem daily, the developmental trajectory of the next generation changes dramatically, unlocking a surge in growth. Sugar provides kinetic energy, but protein builds muscle and armor. Other nanitics focus on hunting down tiny insect fragments and discarded organic debris. They drag these heavy protein assets down the shafts, providing the raw building blocks the queen needs to ramp up her long-term egg production. As these well-fed larvae reach the pupal stage, the evolutionary design of the colony becomes clear. They spin silk cocoons that are twice the size of the original nanitic envelopes. Because the input of food has compounded, this second wave of workers will be structurally superior, larger, stronger, and more durable. When the second generation finally hatches, the contrast is spectacular. Out steps a fully grown, darkly pigmented, heavily armored standard worker ant. Her mandibles are thick, her legs are muscular, and her shell is built to withstand the elements. the fragile nanitics have successfully raised their own larger, stronger replacements. With the arrival of these robust adults, the colony's infrastructure accelerates. These large workers take over the heavy labor, carving deep, structured transit highways and large ventilation shafts into the dense subsoil. The infrastructure of a true underground metropolis begins to replace the simple, temporary survival cell. The dangerous task of surface foraging is also revolutionized. These large, strong workers travel farther, carry heavier payloads, and can actively defend themselves against minor predators. They lay down robust, multi-layered pheromone trails, establishing permanent, high-speed logistics lines through the backyard jungle. Having fulfilled their purpose, the historic first workers begin to fade. Engineered for speed and born from starvation, nanitics have short lifespans, lasting only a few weeks. They do not live to see the grand metropolis their colony will become, but their brief, hyper-aggressive survival sprint has secured the future of the empire. Today, the queen rests inside a highly fortified, climate-controlled royal sanctuary, fed, cleaned, and protected by hundreds of her expanding daughters. She has transformed into a flawless, permanent genetic engine. She will never see the sun or feel the wind again, dedicating the next 20 years of her life to pure reproduction. The numbers tell the story of an incredible biological triumph. What began as a single, vulnerable queen hiding in a self-dug hole has expanded into a complex, self-sustaining superorganism numbering in the hundreds. The survival race has been won, and the foundations of a subterranean empire are firmly locked into place. Every great empire on Earth begins with a single, fragile spark. For the ant colony, that spark was a handful of stunted, starving daughters who refused to let their mother perish. Stay tuned as we continue to decode the hidden engineering, tactical warfare, and secret mechanics operating right beneath your feet. To the casual observer, an anthill is nothing more than a minor backyard nuisance, a disorganized pile of loose sand and discarded dirt easily swept away by a passing boot. But step across that tiny threshold, and you enter the upper ventilation port of a massive, hyper-industrialized, subterranean supercity. Beneath the surface lies a masterclass in structural engineering, fluid dynamics, and thermodynamics that rivals the design of modern human skyscrapers. An established ant colony does not dig blindly into the earth. Instead, they execute a highly calculated urban planning blueprint that can plunge over 10 feet straight down into the subsoil. This massive architectural network features hundreds of specialized chambers connected by a complex web of precise transit tunnels, housing a highly organized population of millions of individuals working in absolute pitch-black darkness. The external mound itself functions as the primary engine for the city's complex life support network. Built with precise geometry, the mound acts as a passive solar chimney. By manipulating the angle, height, and porosity of the loose soil walls, the ants utilize the ambient wind blowing across the yard to generate a powerful physical vacuum effect, drawing fresh oxygen deep into the lowest chambers. Without this advanced passive ventilation network, a subterranean colony would suffocate within hours. Millions of breathing insects respire continuously, generating massive amounts of toxic carbon dioxide. To combat this, structural engineers build specialized, wide-diameter vertical highway shafts that act as massive exhaust vents, generating solar-powered convection currents that constantly flush stale air out of the nest. Just below the surface mound lie the colony's primary thermal collection chambers. These horizontal spaces are designed to absorb and store the radiating warmth of the sun during the peak afternoon hours. Worker ants utilize these specific zones as temporary staging areas, absorbing the heat into their chitinous bodies before moving back down into the colder depths to warm the lower sectors. Navigating miles of dark, looping tunnels requires an airtight tracking system. Ants manage this spatial mapping entirely through chemical orientation. By utilizing specialized scent glands, they print distinct, multi-layered pheromone trails directly onto the earthen highway floors. These invisible chemical lanes dictate speed limits, specify directional flows, and mark critical transit intersections to prevent gridlock. Deep within the structural heart of the city sits the royal chamber, positioned in the absolute safest, most heavily insulated zone of the entire subterranean layout. This room houses the queen. The surrounding walls are reinforced with a specialized mixture of ant saliva and fine clay, forming a highly durable organic concrete shell designed to withstand massive external pressure and flooding events. Directly adjacent to the royal suite are the highly sensitive nursery chambers. The microclimate inside these rooms must be regulated with mathematical precision. If the temperature shifts by even a single degree, the development of the larvae could fail. Nurse ants manage this threat by constantly moving the entire brood up and down the vertical shaft network, tracking the ideal thermal bands hour by hour. To feed a city of millions, some advanced species incorporate agricultural zones directly into their civil architecture. These massive farming chambers require specialized moisture engineering. The ants dig deep down to intercept the local water table, creating vertical moisture siphons that keep the air humidity locked at a perfect 99%, creating the exact ecosystem needed to cultivate their critical fungal crops. Civil sanitation is highly critical to preventing catastrophic disease outbreaks within the dense subterranean population. To handle this threat, architects designate specific, isolated rooms at the absolute lowest boundaries of the nest layout to function as garbage dumps. All biological waste, expired workers, and hazardous molds are transported down to these sealed chambers to protect the main population. The execution of these complex architectural designs is governed by an automated behavioral algorithm known as stigmergy. No single ant holds a master blueprint of the city in its brain. Instead, individual workers react dynamically to changes in the immediate environment. A chemical signal, or a collapse in a tunnel wall, automatically triggers specific, localized repair behaviors, allowing the city to self-assemble cleanly. When torrential rainstorms saturate the backyard turf, the colony's structural integrity is put to the ultimate test. The loose sand structure of the outer mound collapses intentionally, sealing the upper ventilation vents to prevent water from cascading down the main shafts. Meanwhile, the internal horizontal tunnels are engineered with sloped, convex ceilings that shed water away from the primary living quarters. Furthermore, the lowest levels of the shaft architecture feature dedicated drainage sumps. These unlined, vertical pits act as structural safety valves, collecting any excess water that manages to breach the upper perimeters and funneling it deep into the water-permeable subsoil layers long before it can reach the sensitive nurseries or queen suites. The subterranean supercity doesn't stop at the edges of the mound. Radial foraging tunnels branch outward horizontally for dozens of meters just beneath the grass roots. These hidden, protected highways allow thousands of field workers to travel out into the yard, gather massive amounts of food, and return to the safety of the nest core without ever exposing themselves to predators above ground. Defending this massive architectural asset requires a highly specialized military infrastructure. Narrow choke points are intentionally built into the primary entry shafts. If a hostile colony or a predator breaches the outer gates, soldier ants with massive, armored heads deploy to these tactical choke points, blocking the entire tunnel line with their bodies to neutralize the incoming threat vector. As the seasons shift and winter frost locks down the backyard lawn, the city switches into an extreme conservation mode. The ants retreat completely from the upper thermal collection chambers, moving down into the absolute lowest basements, where the deep earth maintains a stable, mild temperature. Here, the population clusters together in a state of semi-dormancy, protected by meters of insulating soil. So the next time you step onto your backyard lawn and spot a tiny mound of sand disrupting your stone path, realize that you aren't just looking at a minor patch of loose dirt. You are standing directly over an advanced organic metropolis. Their internal computational network is actively managing complex airflow vectors, calculating structural loads, and monitoring thermal boundaries in real time. These micro-metropolises function with a level of logistical efficiency that modern human city planners can only dream of achieving. Every single tunnel segment, vertical exhaust shaft, and specialized nursery chamber is a testament to millions of years of automated evolutionary refinement, operating seamlessly right beneath our feet. As you step over the mound and go about your day, the quiet routine of the city below continues uninterrupted. The structural maintenance teams continue clearing out sand grains, the farmers monitor the fungal humidity, and the ventilation shafts continue drawing in fresh oxygen, sustaining a hidden empire that quietly thrives in the shadows of our world. Stay tuned as we continue to break down the fascinating, hidden engineering and advanced survival mechanics of the everyday wildlife thriving right outside your door. The natural world is full of brilliant architecture, waiting to be decoded, one hidden layer at a time. In a human city of millions, order requires a massive apparatus of managers, schedules, and top-down commands. But look beneath the soil into an established ant metropolis, and you will find an industrial miracle operating in total anarchy. Thousands of individuals move with flawless coordination, filling highly specialized roles as nurses, foragers, engineers, and soldiers. Yet no one is giving orders. This mysterious coordination is driven by a brilliant evolutionary design known as age polyethism, a chronological job assignment system. An ant doesn't choose its career path, it ages into it. This automated progression naturally balances the workforce while ensuring that the oldest, most expendable individuals take on the most dangerous tasks. The journey begins in the safest, deepest depths of the fortress. For the first few weeks of adulthood, a worker's body is fragile and its shell is soft. Driven by internal hormonal cues, its behavior is strictly bound to the nursery. These young nurse ants spend every hour in absolute darkness, cleaning, sorting, and regulating the microclimate of the developing brood. As the worker's exoskeleton hardens and cures into a dark, protective armor, its internal wiring shifts. It graduates from the nursery and moves up into the colony's infrastructure layer. These middle-aged ants become the city's maintenance crews and logistics handlers, clearing tunnel blockages, reinforcing walls with clay mortar, and moving heavy food reserves. Finally, in the final weeks of its short life, the ant takes on the ultimate promotion, foraging. Having survived the interior trials, these elderly workers step out into the terrifying, high-stakes upper world. They face predators, elements, and dehydration. Because their remaining life expectancy is short, losing them to a predator represents a minimal caloric loss to the colony empire. But age is only the baseline structure. To respond to sudden emergencies, the colony relies on an incredibly dynamic local feedback loop. Ants read the immediate needs of the city not from a manager, but through localized chemical cues, task-switching triggers, and pheromone concentrations embedded right in the air around them. Consider a crisis. A heavy boot caves in a vital ventilation shaft. The ants nearby don't wait for an assessment team. The sudden physical blockage and the sharp spike in local carbon dioxide levels trigger an immediate behavioral override. Foragers instantly drop their food assets and transform into construction workers on the spot, solving the problem locally. Among these varied professions is one of the most unusual, critical, and specialized roles in civil sanitation, the undertaker ant. Operating at the absolute boundaries of the city, these dedicated sanitation workers are tasked with managing a grim but vital logistical challenge: the safe removal of dead nestmates. An undertaker ant doesn't identify a dead companion by sight or lack of movement. Instead, they rely strictly on organic chemistry. When an ant dies, its body begins to leak a specific chemical signature: oleic acid. This cold, invisible decay scent acts as a universal biological death warrant that undertakers can track through pitch-black tunnels. The moment the oleic acid scent hits its receptors, the undertaker's automated protocol fires. It approaches the corpse, lifts the heavy weight cleanly over its head, and begins a long, disciplined march up out of the colony core. It carries the dead Indian away to a dedicated external trash pile, preventing catastrophic disease outbreaks within the dense population. Because this system is entirely governed by simple chemical algorithms, it can lead to surreal, darkly comic errors. In laboratory experiments, scientists took a perfectly healthy, living ant and coated it with a drop of synthetic oleic acid. The moment an undertaker crossed its path, the chemical code overrode reality. The living ant kicked, struggled, and protested, but to the undertaker, the chemical data was absolute. The undertaker grabbed its active, breathing sister, hauled it up the main vertical highway, and casually tossed it directly onto the garbage dump outside, along with the actual debris and historical casualties. The story doesn't end there. The exiled ant simply sat up on the trash pile, thoroughly groomed its legs and antennae to strip the sticky oleic acid off its armor, and then marched right back down the front door into the nest to resume its day job. Until the scent was entirely gone, it was dead to the world. While this algorithm can lead to individual errors, at a systemic level, it represents a masterclass in resilience. Compare it to a traditional human corporate hierarchy. In a human system, if a manager fails, or a single communications node is severed, an entire department can gridlock, causing a catastrophic operational shutdown. But an ant colony has 0 central points of failure. There is no executive suite to strike down, no communication line to cut, and no middle manager to confuse. If half the foraging force is wiped out by a lawnmower, the shifting local chemical balance automatically pulls workers from infrastructure duties to fill the void instantly. This automated adaptability creates a civilization that is highly fluid, perfectly efficient, and infinitely scalable. By replacing complex personal decisions with simple, hyper-localized chemical rules, a collection of simple insects builds a collective superintelligence capable of surviving almost any external ecological disruption. And what of the queen? While humans style her as a monarch ruling from a throne room, she has absolutely no knowledge of the colony's day-to-day labor balance. She sits in the deep dark, laying eggs in a room managed entirely by the autonomous actions of her daughters, a passive passenger inside a self-governing empire. So when you step outside and see a frantic, twisting trail of ants tracking across your stone steps, remember that you are looking at the external pipelines of a brilliant, distributed computer. There are no leaders here, no committees, and no strategy meetings. Just a flawless execution of evolutionary code. By shifting our lens to look closely at these micro-metropolises, we decode an entirely different way to organize civilization, one where individual simplicity combines to form an unbeatable, immortal collective intelligence right beneath our feet. Stay tuned as we continue to tear open the subterranean blueprints, tactical combat strategies, and secret mechanics of the complex wildlife thriving right outside your door. The natural world has already engineered the future, one hidden layer at a time.
Every ant colony operates under a profound biological illusion that their queen is untouchable, guarded deep within a subterranean fortress. But some invaders don't care about foraging for food or expanding territory. They want the throne itself. And the terrifying reality is that the assassination has already begun from within. The invading queen does not attack with raw violence. She begins with a calculation of pure chemical camouflage. She rubs her body aggressively against dead host workers, absorbing their exact hydrocarbons onto her own cuticle shell. She lingers in the shadows until her entire surface profile renders an identical match to the host colony's signature scent. Because ants identify friend from foe purely by the language of smell, the disguised imposter takes her first step inside. She walks directly past heavily armed soldier guards who stand completely blind to the threat, pacified by the fake scent. She moves deeper into the subterranean maze, completely unbothered, bypassing the very workers sworn to protect the kingdom. Now she approaches the one individual she can never truly fool with scent alone, the reigning queen. In the deepest, quietest room of the nest, a patient, horrific execution is initiated. In species like Bothriomyrmex, this assassination is not a swift strike, but a grueling test of endurance. The invading queen climbs directly onto the host queen's back and grips her tightly, remaining anchored for hours and even days. She begins a slow, methodical sawing motion, utilizing her sharp mandibles to patiently sever the host queen's head entirely. Because the execution happens slowly and in absolute darkness, the surrounding host workers never register an attack. Nothing appears wrong to the collective colony mind until the decapitation is completely finalized. The horror completes itself almost immediately after the host queen's body goes cold. In a profound subversion of loyalty, the host workers instantly approach and begin to calmly groom the assassin queen. She smells correct, she sits on the royal throne, and as far as the collective colony intelligence knows, their mother never died. The usurper begins reproducing immediately, pumping out her own genetic lineages into the host nest. The loyal host workers, driven blindly by pheromones rather than true identity, raise her offspring exactly as their own. This initiates the slow generational long game of a total demographic replacement. The original host workers live out their natural lives, working frantically for a sovereign that was never theirs. Generation by generation, the original inhabitants die off from old age and wear, replaced entirely by the imposter's biological children. Eventually, not a single member of the original genetic line remains alive within the fortress. An entire empire has changed hands, its borders and infrastructure stolen without a single visible battlefield. But not every takeover in the subterranean world is executed with this quiet, insidious patience. Some parasitic species skip the chemical disguise entirely and choose to storm the target colony through absolute, unmitigated force. These heavily armed queens simply sprint straight down the main tunnels, tearing apart defenders and executing the native monarch in a public blitzkrieg. This chaotic, brutal frontal assault triggers a shorter, high-intensity shockwave that completely subdues the colony through raw terror. But whether through the bloody blitzkrieg or a silent chemical deception, the ultimate result is identical. The architecture of the target empire remains intact, but the mind directing it has been completely replaced by an alien force. This unsettling biological coup is not a rare anomaly. It is a widespread foundational driver of subterranean evolution. Scattered beneath the soil right now, there are countless empires operating under queens who were never born within their borders. Stay tuned as we continue to tear open the secret blueprints operating right within the hidden networks of our world. To truly comprehend this ruthless underground warfare, we must analyze the strict evolutionary constraints that forced its development. Starting a brand new colony from scratch is an incredibly low probability gamble for a solitary queen ant. After her nuptial flight, a standard queen must shed her wings, burrow underground, and survive entirely on her internal fat reserves. Over 99% of these independent founding queens perish due to dehydration, fungal disease, or immediate predation. The parasitic queens of species like Bothriomyrmex and Polyergus have evolved a biological cheat code to bypass this bottleneck entirely. Instead of expending immense energy to build a workforce, they simply hijack a pre-existing, fully functioning industrial empire. They let a rival queen do the grueling work of raising the initial generation, digging the tunnels, and establishing security lines. And then they step in to harvest the complete infrastructure through targeted high-stakes espionage. The critical component of this heist is the collection of the host colony's specific cuticular hydrocarbon profile. These hydrocarbons act as a dynamic biological barcode worn on the exterior wax layer of every single ant in the nest. If an ant's barcode deviates even slightly from the colony standard, it is immediately recognized as an alien intruder and torn to pieces. To acquire this passkey, the parasitic queen must locate a solitary host worker at the periphery of the colony's zone. She neutralizes the worker quickly, often using specialized paralytic secretions that leave the host's exoskeleton completely intact. Then, the exquisite process of chemical harvesting initiates, requiring absolute physical contact to ensure a perfect transfer. She grooms the dead worker meticulously, wiping the oily secretions over her own head, thorax, legs, and abdomen. This ensures that when she enters the nest, she is not merely hidden by a mask, she is structurally cloaked by their own identity. As she enters the primary nest gates, she must pass through a gauntlet of continuous olfactory screening. Ants have thousands of sensory sensilla on their antennae that act like a hypersensitive chemical scanning array. Every worker she meets touches her briefly with these appendages, executing a real-time authentication protocol. The disguised queen suppresses her own natural panic response, moving with absolute calm to avoid triggering alarm pheromones. If her heart rate spikes or she exudes a single molecule of stress chemical, the illusion shatters instantly. But the chemical cloak holds, and she descends into the lower tiers where the environmental conditions change drastically. The temperature drops, the humidity climbs, and the concentration of native pheromones becomes suffocatingly dense. This is the nursery sector, packed with millions of fragile eggs, developing larvae, and thousands of highly protective nurse ants. The nurse ants are programmed to execute any anomaly with zero hesitation to protect the genetic future of the hive. Yet they extend their food supplies and offer full access to the disguised queen, completely fooled by the hydrocarbon profile. She filters through the nursery layer until she stands at the threshold of the final, massive royal chamber. Here, the reigning monarch is constantly laying eggs, a biological engine driving the entire demographic output of the nest. The host queen possesses a massive physical advantage, often weighing up to 4 times more than the slender parasitic invader. In a straight physical brawl, the smaller invader would be instantly crushed and dismembered by the massive jaws of the sovereign. Therefore, the assassination requires absolute stealth, leveraging patience as her primary tactical weapon. She approaches from the blind spot directly behind the queen's massive abdomen, moving at a microscopic pace. She scales the shell plates, anchoring her legs firmly into the soft membrane joints where the host queen cannot reach her. Once safely positioned on the host queen's back, she begins an execution that defies all standard rules of animal conflict. She positions her jaws over the cervical joint, the narrow, highly vulnerable structural column connecting the head to the thorax. And then, she begins to saw, applying continuous, rhythmic mechanical pressure to cut through the heavy chitin layer. The host queen shifts and thrashes violently, attempting to scrape the parasite off against the rough dirt walls of the chamber. But the invader's legs are modified with hyper-developed claws that lock into the host's armor loops, making her completely impossible to dislodge. This agonizing slow-motion struggle can continue uninterrupted for 48 to 72 hours. To the surrounding worker ants, This frantic movement is completely misinterpreted due to a masterclass in chemical redirection. As the parasite cuts into the queen, she simultaneously releases massive quantities of specialized appeasement and propaganda pheromones. These chemical signals broadcast a continuous message of peace and absolute normalcy directly into the brains of the surrounding workers. The propaganda chemicals are so powerful that they overwrite the workers' basic visual and mechanical observation networks. They see their mother thrashing in a life-or-death struggle, but their chemical inputs tell them that everything is operating within safe parameters. So they continue to sort larvae, clean the chamber walls, and perform routine maintenance while their sovereign is slowly decapitated. Finally, the mechanical threshold of the cervical spine is breached, and the host queen's massive head falls into the soil dust. The biological engine of the original colony has been completely and irrevocably shut down. The parasite queen immediately detaches from the corpse and slips into the exact geographic center of the royal throne room. What happens next is perhaps the most unsettling display of biological brainwashing found anywhere in nature. The host workers do not register the dead body of their biological mother with grief or alarm responses. Instead, they approach the assassin, extend their forelegs, and begin to groom her with absolute devotion. Normalcy immediately replaces horror. She smells right. She sits where their queen once sat, and the colony's continuity framework remains unbroken. The usurper switches her metabolic gear from espionage to hyper-output reproductive generation. She begins laying hundreds of eggs every hour, anchoring her own parasitic genetic line directly into the infrastructure of the stolen nest. The host workers organize these foreign eggs into pristine geometric stacks, unaware that they are cultivating their own replacement. This initiates the silent, generational long game where the demographic profile of the fortress changes entirely over time. Host workers live out their fixed, natural lifespans, performing intensive foraging runs and structural maintenance for a sovereign that was never theirs. As they perish one by one from physical exhaustion and age, they are not replaced by native sisters. Instead, the new generation hatching from the nursery consists entirely of the parasite queen's hyper-aggressive children. Within a year, the entire demographic transition completes itself down to the absolute last individual. The original species has been completely wiped out from the location, yet their stolen empire continues to buzz with flawless efficiency. But the subterranean ecosystem has engineered an alternative, far more explosive strategy for royal replacement. In species like the slave-making ant Polyergus, there is zero patience for chemical espionage or slow-motion assassinations. The Raider Queen charges straight down the main gates, surrounded by a vanguard of highly specialized shock troop soldiers. They skip the disguise completely, organizing massive, coordinated military invasions to storm rival nests by direct force. They execute defensive guards with rapid, hyper-aggressive mandatory strikes, creating a state of complete structural panic. This blitzkrieg method completely bypasses the security screening arrays by overwhelming them with sheer physical velocity. The Raider Monarch breaks into the royal core, kills the native queen in a public display of raw dominance, and instantly claims the space. Whether executed through an explosive blitzkrieg or an insidious, silent chemical deception, the terminal blueprint remains uniform. The dynamic infrastructure of the conquered colony remains fully operational, but the mind directing its output has been entirely replaced. This chilling asymmetric warfare is not an isolated evolutionary quirk. It is a foundational pillar driving subterranean development. Scattered deep beneath the Earth's surface right now, thousands of macro-empires are operating under an absolute biological lie. The workers continue their exhausting loops for a sovereign who executed their mother and systematically replaced their entire genetic line. They remain blind to the coup, operating as perfect mechanical nodes inside an empire that was stolen right beneath their feet. Stay tuned as we continue to tear open the secret blueprints operating right within the hidden networks of our world.